Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
Take your plans out of the group chat and get long weekend ready in new Abercrombie. From day to night, pack new outfits for every part of your itinerary. Grabbing brunch? Throw on the A&F Mila dress. Then head to your dinner reservation in their new bubble hem mini dress. And yes, permission to overpack for pics with the girls. Abercrombie's best-selling Scarlet Squirt deserves a post in your feed. Your plans are worth it. Shop Abercrombie's new long weekend collection online or in store.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
In this episode, we dive into the hearty, humble world of wild game stews. We'll explore what stew is, how it differs from soup, its fascinating history dating back to ancient times, and tips for building rich, flavorful stews using wild game, fish, foraged ingredients, and more. Whether you're simmering venison, rabbit, or mushrooms, we've got you covered with techniques, ideas, and recipes to up your stew game. Let's do it. All right. Well, now you know the topic, so I don't have to make any other comments about what the topic is because you know it. So, Justin here, joined by Adam.
Hello, everyone.
We're excited today to dive headfirst into the world of wild stew, or the wild world of stew. I don't know, whichever way.
The wild world of wild stew.
The wild world of wild stew.
Yeah.
It's like, what was that movie back in the day, Wild Wild West?
Oh, yeah.
We're just wild, wild stew.
Wild, wild stew. Hopefully this podcast is a little better than that movie.
Whoa, come on. That was a great movie. All right, well, so let's cap it off with some current events, and then we'll mosey on down the path here. So I guess first up, stores fully up and running, spice blends, t-shirts, all that stuff. We're going to be rolling out some new designs here in the coming weeks. Pig Camp is up and out. We've already had some people sign up for it, which is really great. This is the December camp. Rolling into April's camp here pretty soon for an in-person camp with Hank Shaw. It's going to be fun down in Texas. And then we made the decision we're going to go to Missoula, Montana for the rendezvous with backcountry hunters and anglers. That's going to be mid-ish June there. It's going to be a super fun event. If you're in the area or you've ever dreamed of going to the area, this is the time to go. You can go surround yourself with some like-minded folks. Plus, you'll get to enjoy some delicious food by us while we cook if you want. And come see us at the booth and buy some stickers and spices and cookbooks. Oh, that's the other thing. I got the proof copy of the sausage book. It looks great. We'll probably start having it for sale here in the next week or so. But outside that, turkey season's around the corner. Super pumped about that. Ready to get out and shoot some turkeys and hopefully connect with one here in Maryland. Yeah, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Yeah, not too much new. I've been also getting ready for turkey hunting season and practicing I have a box call that I usually use because those mouth calls, they just make me gag the whole time they're in my mouth. I can't do it. A really sensitive gag reflex, and those things just kill me. So I've been practicing my box call a bit, driving my dog nuts. And then I've also been doing a lot of butchering, actually, for people. There's a shortage of kill plants and abattoirs in our area, and even with the shortage, another one burnt down last year. So there's just very few places for people to get their animals butchered. So families who have small farmsteads and stuff and aren't selling the meat, they're just using it for their own consumption, have been hiring me to come and kind of butcher at their place. So I've just been a traveling butcher lately, doing a lot of pigs and cows and sheep and stuff like that. So that's been pretty good, keeping my skills sharp, so to speak. And yeah, that's about it for me.
Nice. That sounds fun. Sounds like it could be an album name, The Traveling Butcher.
Yeah.
With some like some twangy music in the background. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. That'll be my theme song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice meeting all these people. They're kind of fun, like homesteaders, farmsteaders, just good people to hang out with for the day. And they usually it becomes like a family experience. Everyone's kind of helping to wrap and everything. So it's a nice change from the more like pristine kind of I'm blanking on the word I'm trying to think of, but like just, the white stainless steel walls and stuff of a butcher place or an abattoir. It's kind of just a different experience. It's pretty cool.
Almost that way you're not in kind of that like hospital clean.
Yeah, exactly.
Takes you back to your roots a little bit. More rustic
and rural. Yeah,
but still safe.
Very much so. Yeah, we keep things safe. I don't butcher in dirty areas or whatever. So
that's good.
Been pretty happy.
Good, great. All right, let's do it. So starting off, stew it. Starting off, what exactly is a stew? Well, you'll be delighted to know that the Cambridge Dictionary defines a stew as a type of food consisting usually of meat or fish and vegetables cooked slowly in a small amount of liquid. On the contrary, the Merriam-Webster defines it as food, in parentheses, as meat with vegetables prepared by slow boiling. And then the famed Wikipedia defines it as a combination of solid food ingredients that have been cooked in liquid and served in the resultant gravy. Ingredients can include a combination of vegetables and may include meat, especially tougher meats suitable for slow cooking, such as beef, pork, venison, rabbit, lamb, poultry, sausages, and seafood. Interesting, because I wouldn't consider half of those to be tough meats. Like it's a very
maybe like a hare more than a rabbit.
Yeah.
And then some poultry, like old school free range poultry would have like tough legs and stuff. But yeah, the traditional grocery store stuff that you find nowadays is not going to be that tough, I don't think. But that's a pretty comprehensive definition compared to the dictionary ones. I think it makes it a little.
That's true. I think it's also kind of a hand wave, like the meats.
Yeah.
Like there's so many different cuts in there, but you'll be even further delighted to know that we, Harvesting Nature, our official stance describes stew as damn delicious.
Yeah.
We love stews. We have a lot of stews.
Official stance.
Official stance. Stew is damn delicious.
Yeah.
We have a ton of stews on the website. If we have time later, we'll dive into a bunch of those. If not, we'll just put all those recipes in the show notes, which will be really good. And you can go click on them at your leisure. But as we think about them throughout the show, we'll mention them. And then if we have time, we'll go through them line by line. Maybe not line by line, but in a short description. So the big question that I think is probably rattling around in your head right now as you're driving to work or mowing your lawn or watching your kids play outside is, how is stew different than soup? Well, to put it really simple, soups are typically liquid-based with a higher ratio of liquid to solids, while stews are thicker and have a higher solid to liquid ratio. So the easiest way to think about it is chicken noodle soup, lots of ingredients, very liquidy. Chili, which I'll throw in the stew category, and this is going to anger a lot of people, but that's okay. It's a stew. Is more content, less liquid, I would say. What do you think about international stuff, Adam? It's varied.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a ton of international dishes that can be counted as stews. Like you said, chili is one of them. Curry, like a lot of curries around the world. Rendangs from like Malaysia and Indonesia. Tagines from North Africa. Gumbos, everyone knows gumbos. Mexican pozoles, chowders. Karesh from Persia, like Iran. Korean jjigaes. Chinese and Japanese hot pots. There's dals. Chilies, lots more, but we're mostly going to just be focusing on the traditional kind of Western approach to stew for this conversation. So think like your traditional Irish beef stew or American beef stew kind of thing. But we can dig into some of the above or the things I just listed in future episodes. So if you're interested in like more about tagines or gumbos or curries and how to make them wild, we can definitely dig into that. So let us know if you're interested in that.
Oh man, I would love to do a gumbo episode. I love gumbo. I grew up cooking gumbo, went to college, cooked gumbo. I still cook gumbo probably every 2 months, especially when it gets cold. Then it gets good gumbo weather. But you know what? I was thinking about it today, actually, is I'll throw this in the category, is like and I don't know, you may have never had it. Maybe you have. New Orleans style red beans and rice.
I've made it once, but I've never had the true what it's supposed to taste like. So I've tasted my own version, but never by first tasting the real version.
So traditionally, it's made on Mondays. Mm-hmm. So today would be the day to make it. And I was actually thinking about making it for dinner, but it would very much be a stew because it's more of a thick version of that. And then in Choctaw culture, we have a stew that is made from like cracked hominy.
Okay, yeah. Is that Sagamite, or is that a different type of indigenous stew?
I got you. I'll tell you. So in Choctaw culture, we have a stew that is it's made with hominy, so cracked hominy. So hominy is nixtamalized corn. So basically, it goes through a process where you take dried corn and you soak it in a lye solution, traditionally made from ash, and that causes the skin to separate from the meat. You know how humans, we have problem digesting the skin of the corn? Well, this solves that problem. And then also it naturally enriches it with some B vitamins, which is really good for you. And then, so I guess we'll go like post-Columbian, pre-Columbian. So post-Columbian or pre-Columbian, largely made with game and things like that. Post-Columbian, it's made with wild pork, and then eventually like domestic pork. But you essentially take some of those tougher cuts of pork, you throw it into a pot, you put in a bunch of the corn in there that's been processed, that's nixtamalized and then cracked, and then let it simmer, and then it just kind of creates like a porridge consistency with like chunks and shreds of pork in there, and it's seasoned a little bit with black pepper and very other sort of minimal spices, but it's called pashofa.
Pashofa, cool.
Yeah, I made an attempt at making it a couple times to put it up for recipes, and I haven't been happy with the outcome because I'm trying to like take it on a bit further than what I made. I would say it differs from a pozole because it's not flavored heavily with chili, but very similar to that in the fact that the base is hominy and then meats of sorts, just not a lot of chiles in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I like that.
Very cool.
Reminds me, there's another indigenous dish called Sagamite. I might be saying it wrong. And that has like corn and beans kind of with meat as well. And it would often be made with like thickened with corn grits, made with squash and beans or pumpkin, different things. But I actually made a recipe that ended up on the National Wildlife Federation website. But I have it we'll have it in the show notes. That's interesting. So maybe this is a more northern stew of the Great Lake regions versus the southern stew, and they seem to share a lot of similarities, which is very neat.
Nice. I like it. All right. I'm going to follow up on that. That sounds really good. All right. Well, since we've set the base plane here, do you want to talk us through the history of stew?
Sure. Yeah. We're already getting into the indigenous history of it. So let's get into the full world history. And stew has been around for like a long time, like a really, really long time. It's probably one of the first actual dishes made that wasn't just grilled meats over the fire or the coals. It's something that's been easy to make, and you can kind of throw anything into it, making it just kind of the perfect dish. So it's been made for most of humans' history. And in fact, one of the very first recipes ever recorded, which is found on a stone tablet in modern-day Iraq, is actually for stew. The writing carved into the tablet is in cuneiform, was created by the ancient Babylonians, and reads something to the effect of: meat is used. You prepare water. You add fine-grained salt, dried barley cakes, onion, Persian shallot, and milk. You crush and add leek and garlic. So like most ancient recipes, there's no ingredients amounts or details included. But yeah, it does sound really good. It's something I think that modern cooks could still make today if you played around with the amounts. I think all the ingredients, there's no like strange old ingredients in it. But that's one of the first recipes ever recorded, and it's a recipe for stew, which is kind of neat. There's another tablet from around that time, give or take 500,000 years, that It lists ingredients for a stew made from lamb, beer, blood, and dill, which is an interesting combination, and kind of reminds me, minus the beer, of the Persian stews you find today, which will often have dill in it. So that's kind of neat. But stew is obviously being made long before recipes were written, even if on cuneiform tablets, and were likely made with any combination of meats, fish, mushrooms, or vegetables that could be found and enjoyed by whoever's making them. Before the advent of farming and animal domestication, these stews would have been made with solely wild food, of course, and the wild food being, the forageables and fish and animals in the area, whatever area they were making. The ways in which people made stew in prehistoric times is mostly lost to history to some extent. Some archaeologists have clues and everything. They can piece together data and make informed decisions on how things probably happened. But if we look at the more recorded history of North American indigenous peoples to see what they did, it's likely that prehistoric tribal peoples in the rest of the world worked and cooked in similar ways, so we can make some assumptions. Pre-contact indigenous peoples here in North America made stew in a variety of ways, though some are more popular than others, including a method that was you kind of like carve holes through soft soapstone rocks, and then you heat them up in a fire. Next to the fire, you would dig a pit and then line the pit with an animal hide. You'd put water and your stew ingredients, which would be whatever meat or tubers you dug up or flavorings, and then you would get a stick and put it through the hot rock with a hole in it, so it'd be easy to pick up with a stick. And you would put the rock into the liquid and keep doing that until the stew started boiling. And you continue doing that until everything thickened up and cooked and you got a stew, which is also how they made maple syrup, by the way back when. So it's like that prehistoric peoples in Europe, Africa, Asia did the same thing or something very much like it. Then pottery was invented about 10,000 years ago, and clay vessels would have been used to make it instead, except for people who were nomadic, so because clay tends to break, and nomads probably weren't able to use much clay, but they would have had hides around, making that style of stew making popular probably until quite recently. Fast forwarding to a better recorded history, we now know that pretty much all cultures were making stew across the whole world. The Old Testament mentions stew. We know that the ancient Scythians would boil blood and meat in clean stomachs hung over fires made of bone. So if you think all the blood and the meat and fat from an animal would be chopped up, tossed into a stomach, fire would be made using the bones, which actually can burn quite well, and then everything would cook in the stomach, making a very efficient cooking method using the whole animal and nothing else, which is pretty amazing. Romans simmered beef and wine with spices and raisins. The Amazonians boiled turtle meat and tubers in the shells of turtles placed over hot coals. The Viking combined meat, vegetables, and ground tree bark for their stews. They used the tree bark as a way of thickening the stews and flavoring. Medieval Brits would mix in dried fruits and what are thought today as baking spices like cloves and stuff like that. Modern beef stew, as we know today, first appeared in France in the 1700s, where Taivang, a royal chef and cookbook author, wrote about it and provided us with a recipe. So the first recipe for stew was created over 4,000 years ago, and the first recipe for modern stew was invented about 300 years ago. At the time, most peasants would have had a very small coal fire in where they lived in their homes, with a small cauldron of stew bubbling over it. Each day, more ingredients would be added, mixing in with ingredients from days before. If meat like beef became available, which is probably a bit of a rarity, it was likely in the form of organs or very tough cuts, so it would be thrown into the pot as well to help tenderize and get as much nutritional value as possible. And then the stew would have been ladled into trenchers, which are like stale bread bowls. Picture like the San Francisco kind of bread bowl style, but it would be like stale and hard as a rock. But the liquid in the stew would like slowly soak through the bread and make it more edible, so you could tear off pieces and eat it. And that's generally how people ate before, like peasants probably didn't have so much cutlery and plates and bowls and everything at the time. Mm-hmm. And these stews could have just lasted for years. It would have been interesting to taste these stews that just kept boiling forever and always had new ingredients put in. The word stew seems to come from the old French word estouve, or estouve, which referred to a cauldron, a stove, or like a heated room. This word is rooted in the Latin extufare, which meant to evaporate. which makes sense for stew because you're cooking down things down in liquid and evaporating that liquid. This word, though, back then was often linked to bathhouses, brothels, and drunkenness, making the term pretty risque. So if you were stewed or you're having a stew, it could be something with beef and barley and carrots, or it could be an orgy. So I'm happy that's kind of cleaned out today, and we don't find ourselves.
No question on that.
Yeah, we suddenly find ourselves doing the podcast on orgies. Modern stew from France made its way to Ireland, and then came over with the millions of immigrants during the potato famine. So when all the Irish showed up to the shores of the United States, they brought stew with them. People here were probably already making stews, like the indigenous people were making stews. There were Hungarians making goulash-style stews. There's all sorts happening, but that kind of thick brown stew that everyone knows was probably mostly brought over by the Irish. And they came over due to the potato famine, and what's a beef stew without potatoes anyways? So they would have to come here and source some potatoes again. Stew is still popular today and is made in all its myriad forms all across North America from all different types of people from around the world, and each family has their own recipe for it. Some people eat it out of the can. Some people make it all day long. It all depends. Irish stew is often cooked for St. Paddy's Day nowadays, and I saw a lot of Irish stew popping up all over my Instagram. Mm-hmm. And then stews made with hunted game remain popular in hunters' bowls or on plates in both Canada and the States. I find stew to be a very popular dish for hunters because it's kind of easy, breaks down tough meat, tames big flavors. It's a pretty good thing.
I think that it's like the ultimate go-to, right? It doesn't matter really the time of year. And you see a lot of folks are really intent on only having soups and stews during the cold months. But I feel like people eat it pretty year-round. You know, even chili, even hot and spicy soups as well. Yeah. Like eating them in hot times of the year, which traditionally lines up. But I think people just don't get tired of stew.
It's hard to get tired of stew, especially when there's so many permutations where you can change it kind of from a Irish stew to a Hungarian goulash to like some sort of Indian style curry dish. How could you get sick of that? There's so many different flavors of 3 completely different dishes, all stews.
Growing up, we had soup and sandwich night sometimes. So you just have soup and sandwich. We made a famed basically tomato and macaroni, which was served more like sometimes without the meat, sometimes with the meat, depending. But yeah, it would literally just be like a stew of canned tomatoes and cooked macaroni and maybe some seasonings.
Yeah. If anyone wants to go back in time and look at our podcast list, I have an Antler and Fin podcast dealing with the difference between American goulash, which is what you just described. A lot of people call it goulash, and the Hungarian, which is more of a traditional stew. And it kind of tells you how it became to be that way. It's kind of interesting if anyone's interested in more food history.
All right, so the big question of the night is, do you eat your stew on a bowl or a plate?
So for me, I eat my stew generally in a bowl. I'll let you in on a little secret. We don't eat at the kitchen table, really. We don't have children, so it's just 2 of us. So we end up eating on the couch quite often with a plate propped up on our knees. So a bowl just makes that a little safer when you got a liquidy kind of thing. But I found when taking photos, like my food photography for recipe making, it always just seems to look better on a plate. So I make it a little thicker and then I pile it up on the plate and it seems to look a little nicer. So
unless you have like a really, really pretty, like, and I like shooting in the wider, flatter bowls.
Yes.
And if they're like really pretty, those make good photos because you get a little, then you over liquid it. And so you can see like some of that. But with the stew, it's a little different. I think bowl, I'm pretty, I guess, I can't say traditionalist now that I just found out people ate it out of hard bread the whole time.
Maybe we should go back to that.
Yeah.
Eating out of trenchers.
I don't eat a ton of bread as much. Spoon or fork, it depends on how thick it is.
Yeah, I agree. I'll usually go with the spoon because I can scrape the bottom of the bowl a little easier.
Yeah.
Get the last little remnants.
So what's your base? Do we go with pasta, rice, potatoes? Like there's a ton of bases.
I'd say for like a kind of brown stew, American Irish brown stew, I would go generally with barley or potatoes. If I'm making more of a kind of Southern style, Louisiana style stew. If I'm not sticking to traditional recipes, then I would include rice instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what my
I
go-tos
don't
are.
know. Sometimes just the stew.
Yeah, sometimes just meat and gravy kind of like together in a stew is nice.
It just sounds delicious.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll take it like as a reheat. I'll reheat it. I'll take the meat out and put it on a sandwich.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before. A stew sandwich is pretty delicious. You need a bit of a sturdy bread, or you can go fork and knife and like Wonder Bread. Which we don't eat too often at all. Usually we have 1 or 2 loaves a year of Wonder Bread as a treat. One's for
I don't
turkey sandwiches after Thanksgiving, and the other one is probably going to be made into stew sandwiches. So there's our 2 little treats of the year.
So really, the other like big question is going to be, what do you serve your stew with?
Yeah, so for me, usually it's buttered bread. Which I love to have on hand to scrape up the bowl at the end, maybe dip half the bread into the stew, eat it, and then save the last kind of nub of bread to scoop out the last remnants in the bowl. So I usually enjoy having something like that, which just like stew is a comfort food for me, so it just makes it all the more comforting to have a little bit of buttered bread with it. I don't tend to eat many other things with it, like salads or rice on the side or stuff like that, because I like to have it just as a kind of one bowl meal that you just sit down and enjoy. And bread, I find I can just perch on top, so you don't have to like have separate plates for bread and everything. And then usually I'm a hot sauce fiend, so I'll put some chili oil hot sauce probably on there too, just to spice it up a bit. Yeah. How about yourself?
I found myself adding more hot sauce to things because I'll make things at a temperature that the kids can handle, and then everybody else can just kind of adjust for spice. And I still make things flavorful, don't get me wrong. But like the hotness, I think I like having that little bit of like a little acid and heat in there that the hot sauce brings. Adds a nice balance to a dish usually. I think for a base, I rice is pretty common. Pasta is less common. If I'm eating pasta, it's usually is like a Italian style, and I don't find myself putting stews on it a lot. And then I think just eating with it, usually it's just solo. Normally it's just like a bowl of whatever I've got. Bowl. Yeah.
So I think I misunderstood your question before, but the base, so I thought you were saying the base being like, what do you put in the stew, like cook in the stew, that's kind of like the base for it, but you were talking pouring stew on top of the base.
Yeah.
Which I misunderstood the question. I just don't, generally. There's not too often that I would ever put stew on top of something, unless it was like a curry or something like that, then I would do it with rice. But generally I just put everything I want in my stew and then just have it as is like that, and maybe dip bread in it. So that's my answer to your early question too.
Got it. Same. So you're just a bread guy.
Yeah, we don't need a ton of bread, but I think that it kind of goes hand in hand with stew, which we've been seeing since medieval days, apparently. So
allegedly, you're eating it right.
Yeah.
Although you're lacking some dried barley cakes, onion and Persian shallots, and milk.
Yeah, maybe we should add some milk next time. Make it super legit.
Well, let's switch gears. We've talked a lot about kind of our personal preferences with stew. We've talked a lot about just the origins of stew. But if you're struggling with stew, or maybe you're turned off from stew because you had a bad stew experience, what could be some good steps that you could take that might move the needle in the other direction and put you in the stew camp? I would say, first off, let's choose the right cut. So you're going to choose the right cut, which makes stews a prime candidate for your hardworking, tough muscles like shoulder, shank, neck, anything with like a lot of connective tissue. We've said it a lot on this podcast, especially through the Cooking by Cut series. Like all that breaks down into delicious, rich collagen, which just gives stew a really great, comforting feel when you eat it. Cuts like sirloin tip, they aren't ideal because those are going to be some of your less connectively bound cuts, but they'll still make a good stew. I would shy away from the tenderloin, the loin, or like your leaner tender cuts. Those are best prepared hot on high heat very quickly. That way you don't overcook them and then they end up turning very tough. So I would save those for the grill or for the skillet, and really just lean towards those cuts that are more tough. But I think it's a great opportunity to take those cuts and let them cook in something for a long period of time to break them down, and then all that flavor just mends together so well. If you're buying meat for stew, avoid those stew cuts, which are usually just a smorgasbord of different types of meat, and you never really know what it is. So you're going to get a variety of textures and stuff that you may not want, including end trimmings from the loin or other tender cuts that may end up tough.
You'll probably pay more for it too per pound than whole beef too.
Because there's that processing charge in the back. But I would get whole pieces of cut. Blade, chuck are good. Then you can break those cuts down yourselves. You know exactly what it is. You can trim to your desire, and then whole staked cuts rather than cube. We'll talk about this in just a second. So I would say I'll pass the next step to Adam. What you got?
Sure. So from this point, we got your meat. You want to take advantage of the Maillard reaction, which we've talked about before. It's kind of the routine, or how the protein's reacting to the heat of the pan. It creates almost like a caramelization. So you want to give everything a hard sear before simmering it. And that hard sear kind of ignites that Maillard reaction, creates a ton of flavor. If you're just kind of throwing red or kind of half-cooked gray meat into your stew, it's not doing it any favors. You want it nice, crispy, dark brown on the outside. It doesn't have to be cooked through at this point, but just has to be seared hard. It also adds a little more umami, a little more kind of everything. It just makes it so much better. What Justin just mentioned, using whole steaks, it makes it a little harder or easier sort of to sear. So if, say you have you're doing a boneless shoulder, you could cut it into cubes and throw it in your hot pan. If you throw them all in at once or misjudge how much you're throwing in, it can lower the heat of the pan so much that they all just kind of steam rather than sear, which is a problem, and it sucks. So you could do a bunch of small batches with the cubes, which works really well, and it's something I still do often. But you can also just cut it into steaks, that kind of shoulder or neck piece or whatever, and then sear the steaks really hard and then cut it into cubes. And that makes it a little easier. You know exactly what's going on. You're not ending up with cubes that some cubes are cooked and some aren't. You're not ending up with gray cubes. If you want to make it a little easier on yourself, steaks work great for that. You're going to want to use kind of a flavorful lard or rendered fat to sear if you can. Wild fat works best, duck fat, stuff like that. You can use a high smoke point oil as well, something like peanut. Once seared, let the steaks cool down and then cut them into cubes for stewing. You can keep them relatively large as long as you intend to cook the meat down to fall apart tenderness. If you happen to like a chewier texture, or you're just an impatient cook and you never let the stew cook it long enough to really break them down, cut them into smaller bite-sized pieces. Also be sure, once you pulled the meat out of the pot, when you're doing them in batches, be sure to add any juices you collect at the bottom of the bowl or plate that you're keeping the meat on. Make sure you add that back into the stew at some point, because that's a lot of flavor there too.
And I would say a key characteristics of a soup is for it to be thick, right? So you're going to want to think about this as a whole process. It's not just, I think a common thing that people run into is they just throw all the ingredients in the pot and just let it go. You want to kind of do it in stages, and we'll start to kind of line through these steps so you can think through them in your head. But now you've got your meat kind of good to go. Next, you're going to go with your thickener. So your thickener, usually flour is going to be one of your most common ones. You don't want to go crazy with the flour though, because then you're going to end up with this pasty, blotchy, blessed kind of stew. So you want to toss the meat in cubes for a little bit to help them thicken up at the end of the process. And a good ratio to go with is 2 tablespoons of flour for every 4 to 6 cups of liquid. So read through your entire recipe before you start cooking, or so you know how much your ratio should be. You can always thicken up a soup later or stew later with a slurry of cornstarch and water, but this gives it a different texture. Think more along the lines of like sweet and sour soup from Chinese takeout versus like thick beef stew from like the pub.
You can also make a roux, which is pretty time consuming, but it can be done well as well. But it's not totally necessary. So if roux kind of scare you, you can just do like toss the flour over the meat cubes and fry them a bit, and that'll be fine.
You should make a roux. I love roux.
roux are good. Yeah, you coming from where you came from, it's definitely roux country.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader. Like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
So now it's time for your veggies, or is it? So now a lot of people, when they're getting ready to add the rest of their stuff and add the liquid into their stew, they throw all their veggies in, and then they cook the stew for 4 or 5 hours, and then the veggies are just mush. Sometimes you want a little bit of mushy veg in there to add its flavor slowly over it while the stew cooks. But I also prefer having some like nicely tender carrots and potatoes aren't just mush and whatever other vegetables you're using. So I like to add at the beginning some onion, garlic, carrot, maybe celery, whatever you're using. You can either chop it up kind of fine or add it in kind of whole so you can take it out later. If you chop it up fine, it just kind of melts into it. That will add lots of flavor, and will stew slowly and kind of disappear. And then when the stew is about an hour out, that's when you add your potatoes, more carrots, whatever else. And that will leave you with like nicely tender whole cuts of vegetables, which I prefer. Watch the size of things. Sometimes I hate getting like a stew with like a fist-sized carrot in it. You're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Make sure everything's kind of cut nicely, and even if it's a rustic style cut and similar size. If you're adding peas, which is an addition. Actually, there's a little history with the peas. Peas were often, spring vegetables, and they would be used in like spring and summer dishes. They wouldn't be associated with stew. But peas were one of the first frozen vegetables available because they're frozen vegetables you could have at any time of year. So they started being added to stew because it was one of the few vegetables kicking around people's houses. So now peas are pretty ubiquitous with stew, but that wasn't always the case. Whether you're using fresh or frozen, add them in near the very end so they remain juicy and bright green and not just like dull little pops of blah. Unless you like dull little pops of blah, then add them in at the beginning.
I'll add this. So here's a good note to think about and write. Remember, the fond is fond of booze. So you don't have to add alcohol into your stews, but it's going to increase the flavor. I know one common one everybody sort of thinks of is like that Irish stew we keep going back to with like a pint of Guinness in there or some other dark beer. But you can use much more than that. So wine, beer, vermouth, sherry, tequila, vodka, whiskey, bourbon, pretty much anything does really well. And the stage in which is fun to add it in is after you've sauteed your meat and sauteed your veggies and you've got the fond at the bottom, which is that kind of like brown cooked bit, not burnt, but definitely full of lots of flavor where the spices and bits of meat juices and vegetable pieces have accumulated at the bottom, and you'll deglaze that with whatever booze you're going with. Just be careful that you don't set yourself on fire pouring spirits into a hot pan or a hot pot, just make sure you're doing it at a lower temperature and keep it away from the flame. But when you do
can even
that,
turn off if you have like a propane, turn it off, add it, then turn it back on again once it's in the pot. It will reduce likelihood of flare-ups. So.
You could also.
My dog did not like that. Apparently, I don't know if you heard that. She growled at me when I said that.
After you add the liquid in, you're going to want to take like a spoon or spatula and scrape around so that you get as much of the bit stuck on the bottom, and that's going to incorporate it into your soup and add a really good flavor. That, I think, is a step a lot of people don't do, and I think it's really important. Not just the alcohol, but even if you don't want to use alcohol, if you just use stock, start to do it there.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely want to get all that up from the bottom at that stage. It's going to give your stew that like grandma's stew kind of flavor, like that really good stuff. So in your next step, you've added your alcohol or stock if you're using it, and you want to add your liquid. You're going to add the meat and the veggies back in to the pot, and it's time to add your liquid. And the best liquid you can use to cook your stew is homemade stock or broth made from the meat that you're using in the stew. So if you're using venison stew, use homemade venison stock. For something like a stew, I prefer like a Richard Brown stock as opposed to a light clear stock. If you don't make your own stock, shame on you. I'm just kidding. If you don't have any homemade stock available, this is something that I learned from Kenji Alt Lopez on Serious Eats, who's taught me a lot about food through the site. Buy some high quality, low sodium chicken stock rather than like beef stock or any of the other kind of like stocks in there. And that chicken stock will actually give you a better blank canvas for your meat, and it won't muddy up a beef stock will muddy up your venison flavor a little bit, where a chicken stock will be a canvas for your venison to appear on. But you want to get a low sodium because a lot of stock is just chock full of sodium, and it's going to mess with your balance in your stew. But honestly, if you're hunting, you have access to bones, whatever your bones you're using, whether it's duck or goose or pheasant or venison or whatever, it's easy to make your homemade stock, and you really should be doing it. Homemade stocks, the reason too is homemade stocks contain so much more gelatin than store-bought, and that's going to give that like awesome rich lip smacking feeling to that stew. If you are using store-bought stock instead of your own, you can actually add unflavored gelatin powder or the little sheets near the end of cooking, and that will give it that same kind of lip smacking texture that you get from like slow cooked homemade bone broth.
It feels like cheating.
It is a bit cheating, but it's better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Yeah.
If you're making fish stew or seafood stew, which is also very delicious, you're going to use fish stock. Chicken stock can still kind of work in it, but fish stock is better. Or alternatively, a can or bottle or two of clam juice. You can just buy clam juice in the tinned fish aisle, and that will give you a really nice kind of seafoody, salty stock to add to your fish stew.
I think that fish stew and seafood, or fish stocks and seafood stocks, are so incredibly easy just to create in the moment. What I typically do is, if I have shrimp, and I typically will buy shrimp with the skin on and peel them, and I'll take the peels and put them in water, however much water I need, and boil them just for a few minutes, and that'll extract it and create a stock. You can also, if you buy a fish whole, or if you catch a fish whole, fillet it and then take the bones and head and put that into your pot of water on the side, make a little stock, and then add that in. Like, it's really simple because fish and seafood stocks can be created so quickly. You can make them fresh just with the stuff that you have on hand. I mean, even to like, if you're using salmon or something, you take the skin off and put it in, and cook it there. I would say alternatively, a cool thing to think about doing with some of your fish is like some of those cross-cut steaks.
Yeah.
Because then you're getting the spine and the bones inside your soup, and they're kind of like held together by the skin and the meat, so they're not going to be floating around as much, but you'll get that collagen that comes out of the spine into your stew, which could be really good.
That's good. Yeah. And then you just pull the bones and flake the fish meat at the end.
Yep.
That's a good idea.
I'll move towards umami. That's a good transition to umami. So umami, or savoriness, that's like your key to a good stew. Like you want that like satisfying, homey feeling. You want umami. And think about your ingredients beyond just the meat, because you'll get a little bit from meat, but not as much as you're going to like. So mushrooms, mushroom powder, tomato paste, Worcestershire sauce, anchovies, fish sauce, Marmite, Vegemite, cured meats, even MSG, and seaweed, dashi stalks are all kind of like good candidates of things that you can add in. Those are coming from a variety of flavor profiles that will satisfy just about any recipe you have. And I'll say too, if you have like a recipe that's obviously not from the Harvesting Nature website that you're like, this one's a little bland and I need to dress it up a bit, look to incorporate some of those ingredients to give it that umami base, and you'll be surprised at how much it will improve the flavor of something that seems very basic.
Yeah, that's right. I would recommend just like if you go to a gourmet food store in one of your travels, they often find, or even things like Trader Joe's, I think probably has them, like mushroom powder. Yeah. It's just like in a seasoning bottle, like a spice bottle of mushroom powder. Or you can forage your own and make your own, which is very simple to do if you have a dehydrator, which I do all the time. But yeah, some of that in there just really amps things up and gives like a real punch of umami. It's so easy and it doesn't take much at all. From there, you want to add even more flavor. So we got the umami, but you want some other flavors to kind of make your stew a little more complex. You don't have to make it crazy with all sorts of different flavors, but you want some little complexity to it. And to do that, you can add herbs and spices, things like bay leaves, thyme, rosemary, parsley, sage, black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, smoked paprika. These are all really good candidates to go into the stew near the beginning. You can use dried herbs, or you can use like whole sprigs. You can use chopped fresh herbs, or just throw the whole sprig, like a sprig of rosemary or thyme. Throw it in, and then just like pluck it out at the end, and you don't have any of the leaves in there, but you have all the flavor, which works really good. Tender herbs like cilantro, dill, chervil, that kind of stuff, you're going to add near the end of cooking to preserve their flavor, because that flavor will just get kind of washed out. But things like, say if you're doing a stew that's got a cilantro kind of flavor, sometimes you can find cilantro with the roots still on or the stems still on. Chop some of that in at the beginning, and then add the cilantro leaves at the end, and you start mirroring, echoing flavors. Same can be said with dill. You can throw a little bit of dill seed in the beginning and then fresh dill at the end, and it will create so much depth of flavor. It's a really cool way of kind of echoing flavors in your stew.
Celery seed and celery
seed. Yeah, exactly.
Huh. That's deep, man. Also, think about adding some sweetness to your stew. I know, especially if you're looking to if your flavor profile is leaning one way, like maybe it's too acidic or too salty, like sugar can help balance that out. So adding small amounts of balsamic vinegar, well, that won't help with the acid, but balsamic gives it some sweet notes. Maple syrup, brown sugar, honey, fruit juices are also good as well. That'll bring some more balance and depth to it, just as well as make it a little fun. That's a cool seasonal play you can go with. You get fruits different times of the year, whether it's stone fruits or berries or wild fruits or things like that you can slowly add in. Not slowly, you could just add them into your soup. You don't have to do it slowly. And it'll add some depth and change the profile a bit.
Yeah, you can use dried fruits as well. So like raisins or different things like that can add that sweetness and kind of change the texture of your stew. Interesting. A lot of like North African tagines, which is a special type of stew there, often have
raisins,
dried fruits incorporated in them, like apricots, raisins, different currants, and different things like that. I just thought of like a really cool kind of like bison stew, like a prairie bison stew with dried service berries. Like that would be awesome. So you can really play with flavors like that. If you find yourself reaching for more and more salt as you're trying to flavor something, and maybe your doctor told you to eat less salt, or maybe you find like this seems to be too much salt and I can't get the flavor to really pop, try adding acid instead of salt first. So acidic, sour flavors can often balance dishes without making them actually taste sour. So a tiny little amount of lemon juice or different types of vinegars, there's a huge flavor profile in different vinegars, fair juice, citrus juice, that can all help balance your stew. So, add a little salt, taste it. If it's still unbalanced, add a couple drops of vinegar, taste it again, and see what happens. You'll be surprised at how much it alters the flavor without making it actually sour, which you might not want. Although Persian stews often use lots of pomegranate molasses, which is a souring agent, and vinegars, and they actually have very sour stews. So that is also a thing if you want to tip the balance even further that way. It's all up to you.
I'll throw this out there. This is not really controversial, but it oftentimes a little contradictory to the way that people see stew. And stew being prepared is you picture, someone over a stove, stirring a giant pot of stew and slowly going. Scratch that image from your mind. Sometimes the best way you can do it is just to cook stew in the oven. And that's really because you're going to get an even heat throughout. You don't have to worry about ingredients burning on the bottom. It's going to caramelize more of the liquid and ingredients on all sides. It's going to add more flavor and depth because that heat is equally dispersed kind of throughout, which is going to play well into your recipe. A good starting point, if you're not really kind of familiar with the method, is you can do your searing and your initial searing of meat, searing of vegetables, deglazing, all on the stove top, and then once you get all of the bulk of your primary ingredients in there, just put it in the oven and put a lid on it, and then you can slowly pull it out, add things in at timed increments, but you're looking at about 275. I wouldn't go higher than that. You can maybe get it up to 300 depending on what you're cooking, but that's going to push you into that area of maybe taking your tough meat cuts and making them dry because you're going to cook them too quickly. So 2 to 5 hours, low and slow. You could also just crock-pot is a good way to go. I know that's a pretty common utility item for most hunters and people that do a lot of home cooking just because of its ease. But try it in the oven too and see what your flavor differences are. Just leave yourself some time to make a really good slow cooked stew. Don't rush it.
Yeah, definitely. Did you know the interesting fact is that it's way more dangerous to have a crock pot on the counter left unattended than it is to have something in the oven?
Really?
People often will think that the crock pot is safer, but the crock pot, and I'm still using a crock pot that it must have been made in the 70s. It's on a little electric cord plugged into an outlet, and it can start a fire way easier. But if a fire starts in the oven, say you forgot about it, the oven protects itself by, most fires will remain in the oven and won't burn down your house unless it gets too out of control. So it's actually safer to cook something in the oven than in a crock pot, which might go against what people would think.
But don't leave your food unattended.
Yeah, don't do it either way.
Yeah.
And if you have the ability to cook over a fire,
oh yeah,
now that's where stew really gets good. Cooking over coals or on a tripod, hanging on a tripod or something like that. A little bit of that smokiness. I was at my friend's farm the other weekend when we were making maple syrup, and it killed a rooster who was been an asshole rooster that was pecking everyone. So we turned him into supper. And we basically just had them cooking slowly in a stew in the pot over the fire all day next to the maple syrup. And we would take, when the liquid was running low, we would just take maple sap in a ladle and put it in and replace the water with maple sap. And then my friend baked into a old school Quebec style pie. So the stew was basically cooked until very little liquid is left. And then we cooked it in a pie that we made on a big green egg. So it was oh my God.
Oh my gosh,
that
sounds
subtle
amazing.
Smoke, yeah, the subtle smoke and the extra flavor from the rooster compared to a store-bought chicken. This rooster was a free range. It was incredible. So stews, if you're staying put in a camping situation or in your backyard, stews over fire just have that extra little something that makes it stupid good.
Yeah, and if you happen to be tapping maple trees, just try some maple.
There you go.
Maple syrup water, whatever it's called.
Yeah. That's so good.
And then too, I think one thing to know is that stews will always be better the next day.
Yeah, it's magic. Some sort of magic. Witchcraft.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
So one thing you might be thinking, we've got sort of this giant list here that we just went through, but what wild game works best in stew? There's quite a list. So I'll start off with some, and then I'll turn it over to Adam. So tougher cuts like shoulder, neck, shank are great for making stew. Those are your kind of easy go-to cuts. Keep those whole when you're butchering. Don't grind them right away. You can always go back and grind them later, but keep them whole and try some stews. I bet you will find yourself gravitating towards the ease of a stew after you get the process down really, really well. Whole birds can be stewed, but tougher leg meat works best. So pheasants, wild turkey, grouse, duck, geese, all those have great stewable legs. So if you've got friends that only take the breast meat on their birds, tell them you'll take the leg meat and make some stews. I will also say, too, that coming off of birds as well, the gizzards are going to be a great thing for stews. You can stew those, and those get super tender and fall apart and are really, really great.
Necks, too, actually, I forgot to add. If you have necks from a wild turkey or a goose, big long necks, huck them in the pot, too, and then shred the meat. And, it has tons of bones and cartilage and everything inside, which will help things out.
Cured meats can be added to boost flavors, so cured game sausages, or if you're going to pick up a copy of The Art of Innocent Sausage Making, which is coming out very soon, there's some great sausages that you could put into your stews there. Offal can be added as a main ingredient, so heart works really well. Remember our sort of rule with heart: you either cook it really hot and fast, you cook it for a really long time until it falls apart. Trotters are also great. I think probably one of the best ways to increase your gelatin and give it that really collagen rich, almost set it out, cool down, and it turns into a brick. It's so gelatinous, which is really, really awesome.
I visit Asian grocery stores quite often, and they'll often just have pig trotters for sale for next to nothing. And I always just grab one, throw it in my freezer, and whenever I'm making a big thing of stew or chili or whatever, I just throw it in with everything else, and I pluck it out before it's done, and it just lends all this beautiful magic to what I'm making. You don't have to even eat it. I chew on it, but you don't have to. It's just there for adding gelatin flavor. It's awesome. Wild mushrooms can add a lot of great flavor to stew if used as an aromatic, like I mentioned before. Whether it's in, you can make a kind of dice them up small and cook them in the beginning. You can dry them out and use a powder. They just had a ton of awesome flavor, and there's so many wild mushrooms with different flavors, like lobster mushrooms or chanterelles or morels. It's great. You can use it as a side ingredient, like a venison and morel stew or a duck and chanterelle stew, that kind of thing. Actually, I found that wild pork and chanterelles, for some reason, I made a few recipes now with them together. They go together very, very well. Stew is a great time to use dried mushrooms. So if people like me have a cupboard full of dried mushrooms because you've been using your dehydrator and coming in with hauls of pounds and pounds of mushrooms, end up with a ton of jars just full of dried mushrooms. And you can just add those right into the stew, and they'll just rehydrate as they cook, adding their umami flavor and everything. And then by the time it's done, they'll just be ready and delicious. So mushroom stews, they go hand in hand. Other forageables like tubers, cattail roots, or greens like nettles, lamb's quarters, different things like that. Certain types of bark. Now we're getting back into Viking stews. There's bark and you can use intercambium of bark, and you can use some bark ash or certain barks that are ground up. I'll let you do your research on that instead of getting into it, but that's a really cool way of flavoring things. Even like we mentioned before, fruits are great additions to stew, whether dried or fresh. And then fish and seafood stews are great, but need much less cooking time. So we're talking cooking something 2 to 5 hours on a regular stew, especially something like shanks or something. Fish and seafood needs much, much less time. We're talking in minutes rather than hours for the most part. But you can use any edible fish, whether it's a lake fish or a sea fish, saltwater fish. You can use crustaceans, mollusks, foraged sea vegetables are really good. You can mix them up. I find that mixed seafood dishes come out a lot better than mixed meat dishes. Some mixed meat dishes are good, but mixed seafood always just comes out great. So think of like a chowder, like a thick chowder or different things like that, and you're thinking of a really good seafood stew.
Cioppino,
yeah.
Oh, that's good. All right, we've talked about so much hot tips with stew. I mean, I feel you should be really comfortable. If not, tell us. We need to talk more about stews, and we will. But we'll quickly run through just a few recipes. You can find these in the show notes. The links will be there. So wild hog pachikos. I always say that wrong.
I think poikikos.
Poikikos.
Poiki.
I'm not from South Africa.
I have a South African brother-in-law, which is the only reason why I know that. How to say that.
Venison shank sagamite, rabbit deer pumpkin beer stew, goose and potato stew, creamy venison meatball and gnocchi stew, coconut fish stew, venison heart stew, lobster mushroom aba ada stew, Sudanese lamb stew with wild purslane, and then if you need a refresher, how to make venison brown stock. Also, there's a couple other lobster stock. There's some other stock recipes on Harvest of Nature website. Adam's got some too over on the Intrepid Eater. Check those out. But I think we have swam in a bowl of stew as long as we can swim. I'm hungry. I didn't eat before the show. So I'm going to go do that now. But Adam, last thoughts?
Stew is just an incredible way to, have a special meal, or to, whip up something with a bunch of your leftover meat in the back of the freezer. Like, it's just the comfort food that can do anything. But I've had a lot of stews that aren't that great, even with good ingredients, and following the steps that we showed you here, I think will help you make a better, nicer, thicker, more gelatiny, umami filled stew that will blow your socks off. I hope you try it out.
Yeah. You know what, too? And at the end of the day, if you can't find a stew recipe, go to a search website and type in whatever season or whatever month and the word stew, and something will come up of some sort of seasonal ingredient, and enjoy that and just have fun. I think they're blank canvas. You can create anything with the steps we gave you, and enjoy in your harvests as a result of some delicious stew. And don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and put in some crazy things in your stew and see how they come out. But as always, we appreciate you listening. We'll include all these links in the show notes, and then whatever podcast platform you're listening to, please punch that 5-star button. Leave us a review, tell us you love stew, or tell us screw you. Good night.